Okay. Um, well, here we see one of the architect's drawings for the second branch mint in San Francisco. What's often called the Old Mint, though of course it's really the second mint. The first one was down on off of Market Street. The second mint was constructed from 1869 to 1874. And this drawing is one of a large group of drawings for the building, which are, the drawings are preserved at the National Archives in Washington and have never been published. But about 10 years ago, I was given access to high resolution scans of these drawings. And in 2012, I presented them in a talk at the Mint for the San Francisco Museum and Historical Society. And I think Jason was probably there. I believe Jason was there. Here I'm going to, for our presentation tonight, I'm going to show a selection of these drawings, and I'll add some information about the construction of the Mint, the architect who designed it, and its opening in 1874, and some of the first coins that it produced. So first, let me say a bit about the architect, whose name was Alfred B. Mullet. And let's see, now I want to advance to the next slide, and this is not, wait a minute, okay, I guess I'll do it this way. Yeah, here we go. Okay, there's Mr. Mullet, whose position was supervising architect of the U.S. Treasury Department. He was born in 1834 in England, but came to the U.S. with his family when he was just a boy, and they went to Ohio. As a teenager, he apprenticed in the office of a prominent architect in Cincinnati, a man named Isaiah Rogers. And this was pretty much the normal way of training for architecture at that time, to apprentice. Then, after serving in the Civil War, he joined the office of the supervising architect of the Treasury Department in Washington, and he quickly advanced there and became head of the office in 1866. He clearly was a talented architect, but I think he also was good at political advancement. Well, this position of supervising architect of the Treasury Department was the closest thing there was in the United States to a U.S. government architect, and this position was in charge of constructing all sorts of government buildings, courthouses, post offices, custom houses, federal office buildings, and so forth, as well as mint buildings. And one of the first federal buildings that Mullet designed was the Branch Mint in Carson City, begun in 1866 and opened in 1870. And here we see that Carson City Mint, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And this was a picture that I took 2 or 3 years ago on a visit to Carson City. And then by 1868, he was working on the design for the new Mint building in San Francisco. Construction of the building began in mid-1869 and continued for roughly 5 years. And here we see a couple of views of the construction. The cornerstone had been laid in May of 1870, that famous cornerstone that was the subject of Jason's talk last month, and which reportedly contains some extraordinary coins, including 2 that were supposedly unique, until these examples of them, these 2 examples, were discovered in 1907 and 1978. The 1870 S half dime and the $3 gold piece. These are ones that presumably are in the cornerstone, but there are different theories about all of this. We've heard about this from Jason. I was going to say a little more about this before, but Jason really told us the whole story about the cornerstone. So, so let's move on about the building. The building was completed in 1874 and opened for business on November 5th of that year. And here we see in the next photograph, here we see a photo of the building that was taken around 1900. Well, one of the intriguing or puzzling things about the building has to do with its architectural style, as it's one of the last major examples of what's called the Greek Revival or the Classical Revival, a style based on the simple forms of Greek and Roman architecture, seen here especially in the building's central portico, which has the form, roughly the form of a Greek or Roman temple. Actually, it's more Roman in various ways than Greek, but it still gets included in a general kind of way in what's called the Greek Revival. And I think I have another more recent photograph of the building. Well, this style of architecture was popular in the US mainly from the 1820s to about 1850. By the 1860s, it had been replaced by much more elaborate styles, what we tend to think of as Victorian architecture. That's not a particularly helpful term because there were lots of different styles during that Victorian period. But at any rate, this style was really out of date by then. So one of the questions about this Mint building is, why did Mullet choose this largely out of fashion style for the San Francisco Mint? You might think it's just because he liked the Greek Revival or liked this kind of classical architecture, but that's not really the case, because many of his other government buildings were fully up to date. For example, the old executive office building in Washington, which he designed at about the same time as our Mint, this building was originally designed to house the Departments of State, Department of War, and Department of Navy. And it's now called the Old Executive Office Building, or I guess it's actually now called the Eisenhower Building. It's just adjacent to the White House, as you no doubt know. And as you can see, it's a super opulent building with mansard roofs and lots of complex ornament. What's often called the Second Empire was popularized during the reign of Napoleon III in France. So very different from that much simpler Greek Revival or Classical Revival style of the San Francisco Mint. So what explains the style of the Mint building? And let's look at the photograph again of our Mint building. I think that the reason is that Mullet and the other Treasury officials who would have been involved in the decision making about this building, that they considered this austere Greek Revival style to be especially appropriate to a Mint building, in order to project an image of strength and solidity, just as the finances and currency of the US government were to be solid and secure. So in this sense, we could say that the architectural style of this building has a kind of symbolic aspect. But the story gets a bit more complicated than this. And here we can turn to Mullet's drawings for some clue. These drawings that are in the National Archives in Washington. Here we see one of them. I should point out first that there's a great diversity in the types of drawings of the Mint that are among this group of drawings. They include floor plans, elevation drawings and section drawings, construction details, interior designs, details of the stonework and of the ironwork, and other types of drawings. And I'll be showing some examples of several of these different types of drawings. But here we see one of the elevation drawings. Architects would call this an elevation drawing. This is, of course, is of the main facade of the building, showing it almost exactly as it was constructed. And let me just point out 2 or 3 of the details that I'll be referring to in a minute. And in the next slide, I put these arrows and things on to point them out. But I realize you can see the my cursor, I assume. So actually, I didn't really need to do this. Anyway, first, I wanted to point out the very simple parapet at the top of the building. That's this low wall that rises above the roof line, and then the columns, which are in the Doric order, the simplest of the classical orders. Here we see in the circle there the capital of one of the Doric orders, and at the ends of the buildings, which extend out a bit, at the ends are actually, they extend just a relatively small amount, but extend out from the rest of the building. And these are technically called, in architectural terms, these are pavilions that extend out from the building. And they have columns that are flattened out, as you can see here, and those are called pilasters. In the architectural term for that is pilasters, or sometimes called pilasters. And these are also in the Doric order that have that simple column. Well, I should mention here that nearly all of the drawings for the mint that we have Mullet's name on them, usually in the lower right, and it's down here. It's a little hard to see probably. And it says A.B. Mullet, Supervising Architect, Treasury Department. But no dates are on these drawings. So we don't know exactly when each one of them was done. However, most of them must be from 1869 in the final stage of the design, and that is based on various kinds of evidence. However, in this group of, a large group of drawings, there are 2 drawings that we can tell are earlier than this. And let's look at one of these. Here also, as you can see, an elevation drawing of the main facade of the building on 5th Street. Yeah, I should have pointed out, you probably know the building is at 5th and Mission Street in San Francisco. And we know that this is an earlier drawing for a couple of reasons. First, it has a handwritten notation at the bottom, which is down here, that says approved May 9th, 1868. With the signature of the Treasury Secretary at that time. But also it's a somewhat different, more elaborate design than what was finally built. And this is what why I'm showing it here. For example, with a roof line, and that I put the arrow up there to point to that. Instead of that much simpler parapet that was actually built, and that was in that other drawing that we saw. And let's see a detail of this drawing of showing the portico, the central part, which gives an idea of how nicely these drawings are executed, all done in pen and ink, of course. And we see a bit of the balustrade up there at the top, and also the Doric columns are easier to see here. But if we look at the side elevation that goes along with this front elevation, as I mentioned, there are 2 of these earlier drawings, and the other one is an elevation drawing of the side of the building, and here it is. And we see something a little odd here, which is the pilasters, those flattened out columns that are on the ends of the buildings, the pavilions that stick out a bit, are now in the much more elaborate Corinthian order. And to see that better, let's see a detail of this. Okay, here you see that, and you can see that the column capitals are in the Corinthian order, which is more complex and more difficult to execute. Now, you can't really have Doric on the front of a building and Corinthian on the side. It's simply not done in classical architecture. You can't do it. Um, Apparently, what Mullet was doing here was trying out two different possibilities for the architectural order to see which one he preferred, or to see, try to see the two possibilities for the building. And this was commonly done in preliminary drawings of this sort. Also, I should point out that these are preliminary drawings in that they are drawings that the architect does to work out the design of the building. And then when the design is finally finished and he produces the final drawings, those are called working drawings, because those then are given to the contractor, the builder, or other people to actually use in the construction of the building. But the drawings we see here, these two earlier ones, are what would be called preliminary drawings. And it was often the case that an architect would do one drawing in one architectural style or one classical order for the columns, and another drawing would be another. And it was just that he was trying out different possibilities. And so I think that's what's going on here. And so it shows that he was considering a more elaborate design for the building with a balustraded parapet at the top of the building, and possibly using the Corinthian order, which have made them, would have made the building somewhat less Greek revival. And also there are other details here that are more complex than were ultimately, that were in the final drawings, such as a more complex cornice up here, if you can see my cursor, with voluted brackets and other details here that are not in the final building. Now, we know from various documents that the building's financing began to be concerned about now, resulting in the need for cost cutting. So I think that the extreme austerity of the final design was at least partly due to financial considerations. So there are various possibilities or various motives that have probably contributed to the final design of the building. But speaking of financial considerations, this was also apparently the reason for the use of two different kinds of stone on the exterior. The base of the building is granite, and there's a less expensive sandstone above. There's evidence that Mullet originally wanted to use granite for the whole building. So, so let's turn now to, let's look at it.
Just interrupt for a second.
Sure, sure.
My understanding was that he couldn't find granite the right color. It was the wrong shade, that he couldn't find granite that matched the shade he wanted, but the sandstone did.
Okay, that I had not heard that, but that's interesting to know. So that would have been another factor.
Yeah,
it might have been both. There, you know, there might have been a
right.
financial consideration and also this other factor you mentioned. That's interesting. Thank you for bringing that up, Jason. So now I thought we'd look at a floor plan of the building, different type, completely different type of drawing. And they're floor plans of all the floors of the building. This is the what's called the first floor. It's not, which is the main floor of the building. The lower floor is called the basement in these drawings. So this is called the first floor. I'm not sure you can see this. It's sort of hard to see the drawing at the bottom here, but it says plan first floor, and this is the floor that you, the main floor, when you enter the building, rising up going up the stairs in the front. And so this is the main floor, and then the basement, the lower floor is underneath that. Anyway, so this drawing of the main floor shows and how the interior spaces were originally designated. Along the front of the building, at the bottom here, are mainly offices and a reception room and a watchman's room next to the entrance. And then in the center of the building, these two rooms, I assume you can see my cursor here. These two rooms are the two large public rooms. On the left, what was called the Office of the Mint, where people would bring in gold and silver ore and get receipts for it. And then on the right, the office of the assistant treasurer, as it's called, where people would later come to get payment once the value of their ore had been determined, or at least that's my understanding of how that worked. Again, Jason probably knows more about that than I. And then on either
That's correct, Paul.
side, that's right. Good. On either side of these public rooms are vaults, and here we see the two of them next to the office of the Mint, and then there are two of them on this side for the other room. Actually, one of them goes into the office of the Mint, and then of course the other one has an entrance into this other room on the side. By the way, at first, these were the only vaults in the building. That's my understanding. The larger vaults that are now in the basement were added later when the Treasury Department decided to use the San Francisco Mint as a repository for a large amount of the government's gold and silver supply. But then we see here the rest of the spaces in the building around the courtyard. The actual where the actual production of the coins took place, going more or less in a clockwise direction. So starting here, the function of these have changed a bit they changed a bit in later years, but this is how they were identified in this plan. Starting at the left, the weigh room, the deposit melting room, the gold ingot room up here. And then at this stage in the process, apparently the ore was sent up to the second floor for the assay process, and then it would come back down, and then the silver melting room and what's called the whitening room, and then the annealing room, and then the coining room,
Yeah.
and the rolling room, and then the coining, yeah, and then the counting room, and the coiner's office down here. And in the center of the backside of the building, up here, is the engine room, where that massive steam engine powered all the machinery in the building. And I think I have a photograph of that here, this wonderful coreless steam engine, which powered the machinery by means of belts and cables to run all the equipment in all of those different production rooms that we saw. Well, now let's look at a different type of drawing. First, I'm going to take a sip of a drink. Let's look at one of the section drawings, a different type of drawing that's which there are many in this collection of drawings in the National Archives. That is a drawing that's cut through a part of the building. These are, for architects, section drawings are maybe the most useful kinds of drawings to prepare and to use. And this one is called a longitudinal section, excuse me, which is cut lengthwise through the building. And this one is cut at the point where the public rooms are located. So we see these two public rooms. And then rising behind, we see the building's smokestack towers up here, directly above the steam engine. And in a section drawing, the parts of the buildings, the building that's behind the part of the building that's cut, are then shown in elevation. So these parts are elevation drawings, and again, these parts of the pavilions that are beyond the part of the building that's cut are also shown in elevation. That's just the way these architectural drawings work. And I should point out that following the 1906 earthquake, the top parts of these towers were removed, so they're not as tall now. And I'll get back to that a little later. I'll show some some more drawings of these towers. And yeah, I want to point out some details here, maybe a little easier to do if we look at the other section drawing, cut from the other way, which is called a transverse section drawing because it's cut through the narrower part of the building. And we only see one of the towers here, of course, because the other one is behind where the section cut is made in this case. And where the cut part is shown, you can see that it's that there are parts that are drawn in color. And this is interesting. This tells us what materials the walls are made of. Yeah, so it's color coded, these drawings. The blue-gray color, which we see, for example, well, down at the bottom, especially here, that's stone, and then the red or the pink part of it indicates brick, and you can see that the stone tends to be at the outside of the building. For example, if you look over here, you can see that the exterior of the building is stone all the way down. Oops, yeah, I guess I forgot that I had a detail of this here. And here you can see that, whereas the interior is, a part of the walls is brick. So that's all shown in these section drawings. And here we see this section cut through the one of these public rooms. This one is the office of the treasurer. And so again, we see these cut through the wall that are mostly brick, but with stone on the outside, as I said. By the way, the brick walls are not seen inside the building because they're covered with plaster. Well, the interior spaces in the Mint have basically 3 levels of design, of architectural design. The production spaces, all those workspaces that we saw on the plan, those are generally very simple and utilitarian. Then the offices that are in the front of the building are somewhat more ornate, but it's these 2 public rooms that are the most opulent, with a high degree of architectural ornament, which was no doubt considered appropriate because the inside of a building could be more ornate than the exterior. And these 2 public rooms, I think, had to reflect the prestige of the federal government, because that's where the public would go in for these transactions. So it's not surprising that the design of these 2 public rooms, in contrast to the exterior of the building, the design is more up to date, using decorative forms that were popular in the 1860s, what's sometimes called the Renaissance Revival style, or there are other terms for it. For example, the design of the walls that we see here in this section drawing features the design features doubled pilasters. You can see, unlike the outside of the building where the pavilions had, or the sides of the building have single pilasters, these are doubled here, which you wouldn't find in like a Greek or Roman temple. So that's more of a Renaissance feature. These flattened out columns, these pilasters, and the details are not properly classical. The capitals, for example, have a somewhat unusual form. They don't fit into any of the classical orders. And the fluting of the pilasters, let's see if now it is one form at the top of the column, and then it's different at the bottom. So these are all characteristics which are not Greek revival or classical revival. And let's look at it. I think the next slide shows a photo. Here's a view detail inside this one of these public rooms, and you can see how complex and kind of innovative in many ways these pilasters are inside the building, completely different from the design outside. And in fact, and especially the capitals of the columns are very innovative and kind of unusual. I think that Mullet was just kind of using his imagination when he designed these. And there are lots of other similarly ornate features in these rooms. In the ironwork of the walkways on the upper level, where armed guards circulated, and in the friezes and cornices and the details of the ceilings. And in fact, some very similar interiors are found in that old executive office building in Washington, that much more opulent building that we saw that Mullet was designing at the same time as the San Francisco Mint, which had a completely different style for the exterior of the building, that Second Empire French style. So the architectural style of these public rooms in the Mint was fully up to date, appropriate even for a lavish Second Empire style building. And in fact, these two rooms are probably the best example, I think, in San Francisco of high style architectural decoration of the late 1860s. So completely different from the exterior of the building. Moreover, another curious fact that I wanted to mention here was that despite what I'm saying between the difference between the exterior and the interior, there is one part of the exterior of the building that also had very elaborate ornament. And oddly enough, it was the top of those smokestack towers, which no longer exist because they were taken off after the 1906 earthquake. And here we see an elevation drawing on the left of the top of these towers, and on the right, what's called a composite drawing, which combines three different types of drawings. At the bottom of the drawing here is the plan of this part of the tower. And then we have an elevation drawing of it, and then a section drawing. And this is the way architects put these drawings together. Very useful, because putting the three drawings together, you can really then figure out and know exactly what's going on. And these are the types of drawings that, these are working drawings, by the way. So these would have been, these were the drawings that would have been provided for the contractor and the builders. So to actually figure out and to use when actually constructing the building. But so why is the top of the tower so more complex than has this more complex design than the rest of the outside of the building? I should point out a couple of things here. We see here these what look like balconies, and from a distance outside, these would look like windows or doors, but you can actually see from the drawing that they're not, because the stonework continues in between. These are solid walls, so these are just false doors, or the blind windows or blind doors, as they're called, and leading out to a balcony that no one could actually go out onto the balcony. So none of this makes any sense. There's no function for any of this. It's all just kind of fake. And so what's going on here? Why did Mullet give the tops of these towers this type of design? We don't really know. There's no, I'm not aware of any evidence. He didn't really, there's no written evidence for why this has happened. But I would kind of speculate that it was perhaps to make the smokestacks look less industrial or less crudely utilitarian. It makes them look almost more like observation towers rather than smokestacks. Now that's just my kind of suggestion for why he may have done this. Now, to turn to something else, let's see some other drawing types that are found in this group from the National Archives. And many of these drawings are details of the stonework. And here we see a typical sheet. There are a lot of these, and some that show more details of this, but which show a part of the building's exterior, identifying each block of stone. If you could, maybe hard to see here, but if we saw detail of this, each one of the stones is first shown what the size is, what the dimensions are, and which are shown that written here is actually the dimension of each one of these blocks of stone. And this suggests the extreme precision that architects had to provide for major buildings like this at this time. And these, again, are what are called the working drawings to be used in the actual construction of the building so that the contractor can see exactly what the size of each block of stone has to be when they're quarried and finished. And let's look at another one of these drawings. Here's a detail of one of the cornices of the building, showing how the blocks of stone connect with the brick walls behind, for example, with iron anchor rods. Here we see one of these that connect the stone into the brick wall behind. Mullett gave a lot of attention to working out methods of construction, and he to make the building as strong as possible. He was especially concerned with the danger of earthquakes. There had been an unusually large number of earthquakes in the Bay Area in the 1860s. So this was fresh in everyone's mind, and he really he studied the latest theories of earthquake engineering, and in fact he came up with some innovative ways to minimize the danger of earthquakes in this building. For example, by using a different kind of foundation from that was standard practice at the time. So he was actually quite sophisticated in structural engineering. So when the Mint came through the 1906 earthquake intact, Mullett's structural theories were vindicated. Now, unfortunately, he was no longer alive to witness this. He had committed suicide, actually, in 1890, probably as a result of depression, which he suffered at that time, and this may have been partly due to medical problems he had, but also various professional problems. So that's another kind of a tragic or another interesting part of Mullett's life. Getting back to the drawings, besides these drawings of stonework, many of them are of the ironwork in the building. Structural members, stairways, decorative work, and other parts of the building that are in iron. There's a lot of iron in this building, and almost no wood, again, to make it as fireproof as possible. Here we see a sheet of drawings for the stairways, which are mainly iron, except for the steps, which are stone, and the stairs do have wooden handrails. And here we see plans and section drawings and 3 details on the right there of showing how the structural components are put together. Here, for example, you see these I-beams that support the stone steps and so forth. And several of the sheets of drawings have much larger details of these stone parts. Let's look at one of these. And what's interesting here, some of these drawings are identified as you can see up here, called full-size details. And so these drawings are drawn exactly the same size as these parts are to be constructed. And there are quite a few of these drawings there. So they're large drawings. These are very large drawings. I've calculated once what the actual size of the drawings are, but I can't remember exactly what it was, but they're big. And let's look at another one of these drawings that's, let's see, where's my cursor here? Here's another one of these full-sized drawings of full-size details that show more of this, the cast iron for the stairs. On the right here is one of the balusters of the railing on the stairs, and the newel post that's at the base of the stairways on the left here. All of them with, as you can see, with imaginative types of ornament. And this was typical of the latest architectural styles of the 1860s. So again, you can see that inside the design of the building is very different from the exterior. There wouldn't be anything with this kind of an innovative and kind of fantastical design on the exterior of the building. And now finally, let's look at a couple of drawings of the vaults in the building. These are the two vaults that are on the main floor adjacent to the two public rooms to store the ore that was brought in by the public, and then the coins as they were produced. And here we see the two that are next to the office, what's called the Office of the Mint. And in these plans and sections of these vaults, the dark lines are the iron and steel lining of the floors and the walls of the ceiling. And let's see, I have another one of these drawings that shows in more detail the details of the walls and the doors and even the hinges of the doors that are shown on the left here. These are the hinges of the doors in the vault. So you can see what detail the architect had to give in these working drawings for the building. The walls and the doors in the vaults are shown to be made of several layers of metal, a kind of laminate of wrought iron and steel plates. And this is perhaps the only place in the building where steel was used. That was rather new at this time. The practical production of steel had been made. It was a relatively recent development at this time in the 19th century. So steel is only sparingly used in the building, specifically in these vaults. Well, the construction of the building was completed in the autumn of 1874, and the Mint opened for business on November 5th of that year. And let's see, in the next slide, we see a view of the exterior of the building. This is a lithographic view of the building at that time, right after it was constructed, probably done, this drawing, for publicizing the new Mint. It's not one of those working drawings. For one thing, it's a perspective rendering, as you can see, which working drawings never were perspective drawings. Working drawings and even preliminary drawings that architects made are never, and even today, working drawings are never perspective drawings, or almost never, because well, there are various reasons for that. One is that perspective drawings are not in scale, of course, because they diminish in perspective. So you can't have, it doesn't have a uniform scale, and working drawings have to have scale if they're going to be helpful for the construction of the building. So working drawings are never in perspective. So this is a drawing that was done to publicize the building after its construction. And here you can see the tops of the towers, which were later removed, but you see them there with smoke coming out, so which sort of gives away the fact that they are not observation towers, they're really smokestacks. And let's see, another slide I wanted to show shows several photos of the production rooms in the building. At the top, we see the melting room at the left, and the rolling room on the right, and then at the bottom, the press room and one of the coin presses at the right there at the bottom. These are actually later photos of about 1910. As far as I know, there aren't any similar photos of the interior of the building, the working parts of the interior of the building from the time when the building first opened. I might be wrong about this, and Jason may know of some.
Yeah, Paul, the earliest ones I was ever able to find were from the 1880s, and some of these are 1890 or so. You can tell by the facial hair, I hate to say.
Oh, okay.
And the other thing you notice is that the coining room is not where it's shown on the map, on the floor plan,
Oh, okay.
because the room that's listed as the coining room has columns in it, and this room does not.
Yes, okay. Thanks for pointing that out.
And it also has the marble floor.
Yeah, that's right. Down here, you're.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks for mentioning that. Well, in the Mint's first year of operation, which was 1875, the total, now I'll say something about the coins, just to kind of briefly. The total production of coins was much greater than it had been in the previous mint, and this I assume was made possible by simply by these new facilities in the new building. For example, and I have some views of some of these coins. Over 9 million dimes were coined in 1875, in contrast to only 240,000 in 1874. And those are up on the upper left, of course. And then there were over 20 million 20-cent pieces, and those are the ones down in the lower left here. This was the first year of the production of 20-cent pieces, which lasted for only 2 years, as you no doubt know, at least for the circulating coins. There weren't so many, so there were 20 million of, a million of these 20-cent pieces. There weren't so many quarters, just about 680,000, but still this was about twice as many as there had been in the previous year. And then for half dollars, which we see down in the lower right there, over 3 million were minted in 1875 versus less than 500,000 in 1874. Then the only silver dollars that were minted in the mid 1860s were the trade dollars. In 1875, the San Francisco Mint produced 4.5 million of these trade dollars, and which were versus 2.5 million the previous year. So there were a lot more of these trade dollars. And then as for gold coins, the San Francisco Mint focused mainly on producing double eagles. And here we see those, as it had for the previous several years, and minted over over 1.25 million of these double eagles, 10 times that of Philadelphia and Carson City combined. So that's what they really, there was the real contribution of the San Francisco Mint here. So all in all, the San Francisco mintage of coins in 1875 took full advantage of the production capability of its large new structure. The success of the new mint was made possible to a large degree, I think, by the expert design of the building by Alfred Mullett and his staff, which depended completely on these superb drawings that they produced, which we've been here. So thanks a lot for listening to my presentation, and I'll be delighted to hear any more comments or questions.
Thank you, Paul. Excellent job. Wait, am I? Oh, Does someone have a question?
Yeah, I have a question about in your first photograph during construction, there's rail lines running down the street and in front of the building, going the other direction as well. Some of those may have been public transportation, but were there rail lines installed to bring in the building supplies?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer. What about Jason? Do you know anything about that?
My understanding is that part of town was fairly industrial, so there were existing rail lines, and that was one of the reasons for putting it where it was.
Okay.
Why they looked in that neighborhood was because their workers could live nearby. It was a working class neighborhood, and there were ready access to the railroad because they were south of Market.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other questions and comments?
That
This
was
is
really
Herb.
interesting.
Did the workers come over from the first mint on Commercial Street to the new mint?
I believe they did. Paul, you know?
Wait, repeat that question, please.
Did the workers from the first mint on Commercial Street come over to the new mint, or did they
Yeah.
hire new people?
I don't know for certain, but I assume they did. There wouldn't have been much point in just because you were moving from one location to the other to hire a completely new staff. So they probably had to hire more people just because it was bigger and the bigger facilities and they were producing more coins. But I'm sure they kept the staff that they had. I assume they did.
Yeah, I believe so too. Okay.
How
Any
much
other-
bigger was the new mint versus the old one on Commercial Street?
Oh, it was a lot bigger. I don't have an actual figure for the square footage of these two buildings, but it was tremendously bigger. Wouldn't you say, Jason?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That would be a good thing to do to try to calculate the square footage of both buildings,
Right.
and actually so that you actually can have a good comparison. I never thought
Right.
of doing that.
The problem is there's not a whole lot of information remaining about the first mint. And you can't go by what's there now because of course they had demolished the building basically. The thing was that the first mint was extraordinarily productive given its size and the inadequacy of the building. So, the fact you can't really compare the mintages from the first mint to the second one just because also in 1874 they minted less just in general because there was a economic recession going on again.
Okay.
And there were all sorts of things going on. But that's just me being history. That's it.